स्मार्टफोन है उसमें एक सिंगल चिप पर बिलियंस ऑफ ट्रांजिस्टर्स हैं
बिलियंस?
और वो सब काम करते हैं अ सिंपल बाइनरी सिस्टम पर, मतलब जीरोस एंड वंस।
एग्जैक्टली।
और एआई वो अब सिर्फ साईफाई मूवीज में नहीं है।
नहीं, बिल्कुल नहीं। इट्स इन योर डेली लाइफ। आपके गाने सजेस्ट कर रहा है, मैप्स गाइड कर रहा है।
सो बेसिकली अ टाइनी वर्ल्ड ऑफ मैसिव पावर इन योर पाम। कूल ना?
बहुत कूल।
है। अगर ये आपको हेल्प करे तो हिट सब्सक्राइब नाउ, कमेंट योर फीडबैक एंड शेयर टू ग्रो द चैनल।
सो लेट्स लॉक इन द जर्नी टुगेदर।
बिल्कुल।
तो आज हम टेक्नोलॉजी और साइंस के ए टू जी को अनपैक करेंगे।
सिंपल मेमोरेबल चंक्स में, है ना?
हाँ, we'll start with advancements in computing, जिसमें साइबर फिजिकल सिस्टम्स और इंटरनेट ऑफ थिंग्स शामिल हैं।
उसके बाद फिर एआई की दुनिया में एक डीप डाइव।
एंड दैट्स नॉट ऑल।
ओह, और भी है।
उसके बाद हम ऑगमेंटेड और वर्चुअल रियलिटी एक्सप्लोर करेंगे, कम्युनिकेशन के बेसिक्स।
बायोटेक्नोलॉजी के वंडर्स और डिफेंस टेक्नोलॉजी के सीक्रेट्स भी।
एंड ऑफ कोर्स हम इंडिया के महान साइंटिस्ट के कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशंस को भी सेलिब्रेट करेंगे।
रेडी हो? चलो शुरू करते हैं। ब्रॉड माइक्रो थीम, द मैरिज ऑफ फिजिकल एंड डिजिटल वर्ल्ड्स। ओके, तो लेट्स स्टार्ट विद अ टर्म जो सुनने में सुपर कॉम्प्लेक्स लगता है, साइबर फिजिकल सिस्टम्स या सीपीएस।
हाँ, ये सुनने में भारी लगता है।
ये है क्या आखिर?
इट्स सिंपलर देन इट साउंड्स। बेसिकली सीपीएस एक ऐसा सिस्टम है जहां स्मार्ट कंप्यूटर एल्गोरिदम्स को फिजिकल ऑब्जेक्ट्स और प्रोसेसेस के साथ टाइटली इंटीग्रेट किया जाता है।
मतलब एक फिजिकल मशीन को डिजिटल ब्रेन देना।
एग्जैक्टली वो सेंसर्स यूज करते हैं रियल वर्ल्ड को देखने और सुनने के लिए,
और
एक्ट करने के लिए।
और एक्चुएटर्स यूज करते हैं उस पे एक्ट करने के लिए।
मुझे एक सिंपल एवरीडे एग्जांपल दो।
द बेस्ट एग्जांपल है एक स्मार्ट थर्मोस्टेट। ओके, उसमें एक सेंसर होता है जो कमरे का टेम्परेचर मेजर करता है। ये हो गया फिजिकल पार्ट।
ठीक है।
फिर उसका कंप्यूटेशनल ब्रेन इस डेटा को प्रोसेस करता है और डिसाइड करता है कि क्या कमरा बहुत गर्म है या ठंडा।
एंड देन इट एक्ट्स।
यस। फिर वो एक एक्चुएटर को कमांड भेजता है जो एयर कंडीशनिंग या हीटर को ऑन या ऑफ करने वाला फिजिकल स्विच है।
अच्छा।
तो ये एक कांस्टेंट लूप है, सेंसिंग, थिंकिंग एंड एक्टिंग।
बिल्कुल, ये साइकिल चलता रहता है।
गॉट इट। सो इट्स नॉट अ फ्यूचर थिंग, ये ऑलरेडी यहाँ है। चलो इसे और ब्रेक डाउन करते हैं।
Absolutely. So introduction में CPS is the invisible brain behind many modern marvels, from autonomous cars to smart power grids.
राइट।
Background ये है कि इसकी जरूरत इसलिए पड़ी because we wanted more efficiency and safety.
ओके, मेक सेंस।
Core logic में कुछ key characteristics हैं। पहला, integration. Cyber और physical parts seamlessly merged होते हैं।
दूसरा,
दूसरा, real time interaction. इसे instantly respond करना होता है। A self-driving car can't have lag, है ना?
बिल्कुल नहीं।
तीसरा, फीडबैक लूप्स। वो साइकिल जो हमने कहा, डेटा कलेक्शन, प्रोसेसिंग, एक्शन, न्यू डेटा।
और चौथा,
कम्प्लेक्सिटी। इसमें बहुत सारे इंटरकनेक्टेड पार्ट्स होते हैं।
और इसका रियल वर्ल्ड इम्पैक्ट?
मैसिव। स्मार्ट ग्रिड्स जो ब्लैकआउट्स रोकते हैं, ऑटोनॉमस व्हीकल्स, इंडस्ट्रियल ऑटोमेशन, सब सीपीएस पर बेस्ड है।
इन कंक्लूजन,
In short, CPS is about embedding computation into the physical world, making it smarter and more efficient.
ओके, दैट क्लैरिफाइज थिंग्स अ लॉट, बट आई हैव सम क्वेश्चंस।
Please.
सो एक सिंपल स्मार्ट वॉच जो मेरी हार्ट रेट ट्रैक करती है, इज दैट अ साइबर फिजिकल सिस्टम? उसमें सेंसर्स भी हैं, कंप्यूटर भी है?
That's a great question. और ये एक कॉमन कंफ्यूजन है। एक स्मार्ट वॉच प्राइमरीली डेटा मॉनिटर करती है और डिस्प्ले करती है।
अच्छा।
ए मोर कंप्लीट सीपीएस होगा, एक कनेक्टेड पेसमेकर। वो सिर्फ मॉनिटर नहीं करता।
बल्कि एक्ट भी करता है।
एग्जैक्टली वो डेटा पर एक्ट करके हार्ट को रेगुलेट करने के लिए इलेक्ट्रिकल इम्पल्सेस भेजता है। द की डिफरेंस इज दैट फीडबैक लूप वेयर इट टेक्स फिजिकल एक्शन। समझे?
दैट मेक्स सेंस। वो एक्शन पार्ट क्रिटिकल है। अच्छा, व्हाट डू यू थिंक इज द बिगेस्ट रिस्क विद दीस सिस्टम्स? सिक्योरिटी?
एब्सोल्युटली, द रिस्क इज ह्यूज। क्योंकि ये सिस्टम्स फिजिकल चीजों को कंट्रोल करते हैं, तो साइबर अटैक का मतलब सिर्फ डेटा चोरी नहीं है।
ओह, दैट्स स्कैरी।
Imagine a hacker gaining control of a city's smart power grid
Citywide blackout.
or taking over the traffic light system. The consequences could be catastrophic.
So what really separates a CPS from, say, a simple automated machine like a washing machine? वो भी तो एक प्रोग्राम फॉलो करती है।
The key difference is dynamic adaptation. हाँ, एक वॉशिंग मशीन प्री प्रोग्राम्ड इंस्ट्रक्शंस फॉलो करती है, वॉश, रिंस, स्पिन।
Right.
एक सीपीएस ऑन द अदर हैंड कॉन्स्टेंटली सेंसेस इट्स एनवायरनमेंट एंड अडेप्ट्स। एक सीपीएस पावर्ड कार सिर्फ प्री प्रोग्राम्ड रूट फॉलो नहीं करती।
वो दूसरे कार्स, पेडेस्ट्रियन, सिग्नल्स सबको सेंस करके डायनामिकली चेंज होती है।
एग्जैक्टली।
आपने एक्चुएटर्स मेंशन किया था। कैन यू गिव मी अनदर क्लियर एग्जांपल ऑफ व्हाट एन एक्चुएटर इज?
ऑफ कोर्स, एक कार के ऑटोमेटिक इमरजेंसी ब्रेकिंग सिस्टम में सेंसर होता है वो रेडार जो ऑब्स्टिकल डिटेक्ट करता है।
Okay.
कंप्यूटेशनल कंपोनेंट है वो कंप्यूटर जो कोलिजन रिस्क कैलकुलेट करता है।
और actuator?
एंड द एक्चुएटर इज द फिजिकल डिवाइस जो एक्चुअली ब्रेक्स पर फोर्स अप्लाई करता है टू स्टॉप द कार। इट्स द मसल ऑफ द सिस्टम।
The muscle. I like that. And finally, why is it called interdisciplinary?
बिकॉज इट्स अ टीम गेम, इसे कोई एक सिंगल फील्ड सॉल्व नहीं कर सकता।
मतलब?
एक सेल्फ ड्राइविंग कार बनाने के लिए यू नीड मैकेनिकल इंजीनियर्स, इलेक्ट्रिकल इंजीनियर्स फॉर सेंसर्स एंड एक्चुएटर्स, कंप्यूटर साइंटिस्ट फॉर द एआई।
Or control systems experts be to make sure it all works together?
Precisely. It's a team game.
Fantastic. That paints a full picture.
Now, pause and practice saying this part aloud to remember it. A cyber-physical system integrates computational algorithms with physical processes using sensors and actuators.
Mini recap. In short, CPS is where computers intelligently control the real world.
Broad micro-theme. Connecting everyday objects to the internet.
Alright, moving on to a term जो सबने सुना है. The Internet of Things or IoT.
ये CPS जैसा ही लगता है.
हाँ, they are related but different.
How so?
IoT का कोर आइडिया सिंपल है. हमारे आसपास की एवरीडे फिजिकल ऑब्जेक्ट्स को लेकर उन्हें इंटरनेट से कनेक्ट करना.
मतलब लाइट बल्ब से लेकर रेफ्रिजरेटर तक.
अच्छा.
फैक्ट्री मशीन सबको एक डिजिटल वॉइस देना.
So basically my fridge talking to my phone.
Exactly.
अच्छा.
A perfect simple example है एक स्मार्ट लाइट बल्ब.
Okay.
आप उसे अपने फोन से ऑन या ऑफ कर सकते हैं no matter where you are because the bulb is connected to the internet.
Right.
IoT is about this massive network of connected devices that can send and receive data.
So IoT is creating this giant interconnected web. Let's get into its core logic.
Let's break down the IoT ecosystem.
Okay.
Introduction. IoT is transforming our world into a network of smart, communicative objects. Background. The idea grew from a simple question. What if we could gather data from everything around us?
तो हम smarter decisions automatically ले सकते.
Exactly. And falling cost of sensors and widespread internet access made this a reality.
And the core logic.
The ecosystem. It has a few key parts. First, the devices themselves, with sensors to collect data and actuators to perform actions.
Second, connectivity. Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, 5G.
Right. Third, data processing. Data या तो device पर ही process होता है,
जिसे edge computing कहते हैं.
हाँ, या फिर cloud में. And finally, the user interface, the app or dashboard you use.
And the real world impact.
Everywhere. Smart homes, smart cities, and industries में industrial IoT, IIoT.
In conclusion,
In short, IoT is about making previously dumb objects smart by giving them an internet connection.
okay, this brings me back to my first question. What is the main difference between IoT and CPS? They still sound so similar.
That's the classic question. Think of it this way. IoT is primarily about connecting devices and collecting data from them.
Okay.
CPS is a broader concept that often uses IoT, but its main focus is on the tight control loop between computation and a physical action. So all CPS might use IoT components, but not all IoT systems are complex enough to be called CPS.
Let me try an analogy. So IoT is like having thousands of reporters all over a city, sending in news, yani data.
Go on.
And CPS is like the city's mayor's office that not only receives all that news, but also uses it to dispatch police cars and ambulances, yani actions, in real time.
That is a perfect analogy. क्या बात है?
Thank you.
IoT is the information network. CPS is the action and control system built on top of it.
Okay, security again. If my smart door lock is part of the IoT, can't someone just hack it and walk into my house?
Yes, that is a huge concern and one of the biggest challenges for IoT.
So it's a real risk?
Billions of simple, low-cost devices को hackers से secure करना incredibly difficult है. Data security, user privacy, critical problems है.
You mentioned edge computing versus cloud computing. What's the real-world benefit of choosing one over the other for IoT?
It's all about speed and privacy.
Okay,
A self-driving car needs to make a split-second decision. वो डेटा क्लाउड में भेजकर रिस्पॉन्स का वेट नहीं कर सकती.
so decision edge पर होना चाहिए, on the car's own computer.
Exactly. But for something less critical, like analyzing a month's worth of thermostat data, the cloud is better.
Because it has more processing power.
Right. Often a hybrid approach is best.
You mentioned industrial IoT or IoT. Can you give me a solid example of that?
A fantastic example is predictive maintenance in a factory.
Predictive maintenance.
हाँ. Imagine a crucial machine on an assembly line. उस पे sensors लगा दिए to monitor vibrations, temperature, etc.
Okay.
The IoT system can analyze this data and detect tiny changes that suggest the machine might be about to fail.
और fail होने से पहले ये alert भेज देगा.
Exactly. Saving the factory thousands of dollars.
Cool ना? Very cool.
Now rehearse presenting this segment out loud. The IoT ecosystem consists of devices with sensors, connectivity to the internet, data processing in the cloud or on the edge, and a user interface.
Mini recap. In short, IoT connects everything to the internet to share data and automate tasks. Broad micro theme, the senses of the digital world. Okay, we've talked about sensors being a key part of both CPS and IoT. Let's put them under the microscope.
They absolutely are. A sensor is simply a device that detects a change in its physical environment.
And responds with an electrical signal.
Exactly. Basically, they are the eyes, ears, nose, and skin of our machines.
So without sensors, our smart devices would be blind, deaf,
And completely unaware of the world around them.
and the example you gave earlier was the phone screen rotating when you tilt it, right?
Exactly. That's a tiny sensor called an accelerometer at work.
Let's quickly go through the most common sensors in our phones.
So,
Introduction. We think software makes our devices smart, but the real magic begins with sensors. They are the bridge between the physical and digital world.
And the background is that they've become incredibly small and cheap.
Yes, thanks to MEMS technology. This allows us to put them in everything.
So the core logic. What are the main types?
Okay, let's list a few. The image sensor, CMOS CCD.
Right. Touchscreen sensor, obvious.
Accelerator measures linear acceleration and tilt for screen rotation, counting steps.
And the gyroscope.
Measures angular velocity or rotation. It works with the accelerometer for precise motion tracking in gaming.
Okay. What else?
The proximity sensor. It's what turns your phone screen off when you hold it to your ear during a call.
Ah, that one.
Ambient light sensor. Automatically adjusts your screen's brightness.
Fingerprint sensor.
For security.
Microphone.
Converts sound waves into electrical signals.
And a few others too.
Yes. Temperature and humidity sensors, pressure sensors, and gas sensors.
So the real-world impact is that these sensors make our devices context-aware.
Exactly.
Conclusion.
In short, sensors give our gadgets the superpowers to perceive the world.
So just to be clear, both the accelerometer and the gyroscope are needed in my phone for a smooth gaming experience.
Exactly.
The accelerometer detects tilt and linear movement.
And the gyroscope detects rotation or twisting.
Together, they give the game a complete 6-axis understanding of how you're moving the phone.
You mentioned two types of image sensors, CMOS and CCD. What's the practical difference for me?
They're just two different technologies for the same job. For a long time, CCDs were considered higher quality.
But now,
But CMOS technology has improved dramatically and is much more power efficient. That's why virtually all smartphones today use CMOS sensors.
how does the proximity sensor work without any physical touch? It feels like magic.
It's clever, but simple. It usually emits a beam of invisible infrared light.
And then?
The sensor then measures if that light is reflected back. When you bring your face close, your skin reflects the light.
Sure.
And the sensor tells the screen to turn off.
Smart, right. Very.
And a gas sensor, can it detect any type of gas?
No, they are usually designed to be sensitive to specific gases.
Jaise?
A carbon monoxide detector is tuned only for CO gas. An alcohol breathalyzer is designed to detect ethanol vapor. They are specialized.
Last question on this.
Yeah.
You called a microphone a sensor. Is it also a type of transducer? I've heard that term.
Yes, absolutely. A transducer is any device that converts one form of energy into another.
And a microphone?
Converts sound energy, which are mechanical pressure waves, into electrical energy.
Perfect.
Practice saying this. An accelerometer measures linear acceleration while a gyroscope measures angular velocity.
Mini recap. In short, sensors are the sensory organs that connect technology to the real world. Broad micro theme. Computing with the building blocks of life. Okay, this next topic sounds like it's straight out of a science fiction movie. Biocomputers.
It does, doesn't it?
Are we really talking about computing with living things instead of silicon chips?
Yes, that's exactly what it is. It's a revolutionary concept where scientists use biological materials like DNA, proteins, or even living cells to perform computational tasks.
Arey, wow.
It's a completely different paradigm from electronic computers.
Wow. Can you give me an example of how that would even work?
The most famous example is DNA computing.
DNA computing.
Imagine you have a complex problem. Instead of a processor, you encode the problem into strands of DNA.
Okay.
Then you use enzymes in a test tube that act like logic gates, performing operations on the DNA.
Or,
Because you have trillions of DNA molecules in that test tube, they are all working on the problem in parallel.
it's like having a trillion tiny computers working at once.
Exactly.
So forget silicon chips, the future of computing might be wet and alive. Let's dive into the core of this.
It's a fascinating field.
So, introduction.
Biocomputing is a frontier of science that challenges our very definition of a computer.
And the background? Why explore this?
For two main reasons: massive parallelism and incredible energy efficiency.
Right. A single human cell performs trillions of operations.
With very little energy. Our best supercomputers can't compete with that efficiency.
And the core logic? How do they work?
We discussed DNA computing.
Yeah.
It uses DNA for data storage and enzymes for computation.
What else?
There's protein computing, which uses protein interactions, and cellular computing, which involves engineering living cells.
I read about brain organoids. What is that?
That's the most cutting-edge area. Scientists grow tiny 3D cultures of brain cells in a lab, called organoids and connect them to machine learning systems.
To create a rudimentary biocomputer.
The real-world impact.
Still in early research, but potential applications are huge, especially in medicine, for drug discovery and creating biosensors.
And in conclusion,
Biocomputers are a long way from replacing your laptop, but they represent a fundamental shift.
you said DNA is a dense storage medium. Let's put that in perspective.
The density is mind-boggling. Theoretically, you could store all of the world's data.
All of it? Every movie, website, and document ever created in just a few kilograms of synthetic DNA.
That's incredible.
Exactly.
The challenge must be reading and writing the data.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's the biggest challenge right now.
Okay, the brain organoids thing. Are we talking about creating artificial conscious brains in a lab? That sounds ethically complicated.
That's a very important question. And no, we are not creating conscious brains.
Okay.
These are very small clusters of brain cells, maybe the size of a pinhead. They don't have consciousness or thoughts.
Their purpose is just research.
Yes, to help us study how neurons connect and process information on a basic level. This is valuable for understanding diseases like Alzheimer's.
What would you say is the single biggest advantage of biocomputers over our current silicon-based computers?
It comes down to two things: massive parallel processing and incredible energy efficiency.
Our computer solves problems one step at a time, very fast.
A biocomputer solves a problem by having trillions of molecules all try different solutions at the same time. And it's far more energy efficient.
And on the flip side, what's the biggest challenge holding them back?
The biggest challenge is stability and control. Biological systems are messy and can degrade.
The error rate is much higher than in a silicon chip.
Exactly. Making them reliable and predictable is the key hurdle.
Is this field related to synthetic biology?
Absolutely. They are deeply connected. Synthetic biology is all about designing and constructing new biological parts and systems.
And cellular computing is a direct application of that.
Precisely. Practice this to remember the key ideas. DNA computing uses DNA for storage, and organoid intelligence uses lab-grown brain cells for computational research.
Let me recap. In short, biocomputers use the machinery of life, DNA, proteins, and cells to perform computations. Broad micro-theme, controlling devices with your mind. And now for the grand finale of our computing section, the brain-computer interface, or BCI.
The one that really captures the imagination.
Controlling things just by thinking.
Exactly. A BCI is a system that creates a direct communication pathway between the brain's electrical activity and an external device.
Like a computer or a robotic limb.
No hands, no voice, just your thoughts controlling technology.
And we've all seen the recent videos of Elon Musk's Neuralink patient playing online chess. That's BCI in action, right?
That is a perfect modern example. It demonstrates the incredible potential of this technology.
So this seems like the ultimate user interface. How does it actually work?
Let's look under the hood. The introduction is that BCI is one of the most profound technologies being developed, aiming to merge the human mind with machines.
And the background?
It started in medicine, right?
Primarily as a medical endeavor to help people with severe paralysis communicate and interact with the world again.
To give them back their independence.
Exactly.
Now, the core logic. A BCI system has a few main parts. First, a device to record brain signals.
That can be an EEG cap or an implant like Neuralink.
Right. Non-invasive or invasive. Second, a computer that processes these signals using machine learning.
Third, the application or device to be controlled.
And finally, a feedback system so the user can see the result and learn to control it better.
The real-world impact is mainly in medicine for now.
Yes, helping people with disabilities and also for research into conditions like Parkinson's.
And conclusion.
BCI is blurring the line between human and machine, offering immense hope, but also raising profound questions.
That brings up a big question. Is this technology safe? I mean, implanting a chip directly into the brain sounds incredibly risky.
You're right to be cautious. There are definitely risks. Invasive BCIs like Neuralink require complex brain surgery.
Which carries risks of infection, bleeding, or damage.
Yes, non-invasive BCIs like EEG caps are much safer, but the signals are weaker and less precise.
So there's a trade-off.
Safety is the top priority in research, always.
What about the privacy concern? Could someone hack my brain and read my mind?
That's a valid futuristic concern. In theory, if your brainwave data is transmitted wirelessly, it could be intercepted.
But can they read thoughts?
It's important to clarify, BCIs don't read your thoughts like words or sentences. They recognize patterns of neural activity. Still, securing this data is a major challenge.
Can you explain that a bit more? How does the computer know what I want to do if it can't read my thoughts?
It's all about pattern recognition. The system doesn't know you're thinking, move the cursor up.
Instead?
Instead, the user is trained to imagine a specific action. For example, squeezing their right hand. This creates a specific, repeatable pattern of electrical activity.
And the BCI's machine learning algorithm is trained to recognize that specific pattern.
Yes, and translate it into a command. It's a learning process for both the user and the AI.
So this could genuinely help someone who has lost a limb control a prosthetic.
Yes, and it's one of the most life-changing applications. A person with an amputated arm can learn to control a sophisticated prosthetic limb just by thinking about moving their phantom limb.
It's incredible.
It can restore a sense of agency and touch.
Beyond medicine, what are the ethical issues around human enhancement? The idea that healthy people might use this.
This is a huge debate. The concern is that BCIs could eventually be used by healthy individuals to gain cognitive advantages.
Like having a perfect memory or faster reaction times?
Yes, and this could create a new and profound form of inequality, a gap between enhanced and unenhanced humans.
Society will need to grapple with these questions.
Absolutely. Rehearse this line. BCI translates brain signals into commands for external devices, with primary applications in medicine and human-computer interaction.
Mini recap. In short, BCI connects your brain directly to technology, enabling control through thought.
Okay, gear up. We've built our smart machine with senses and a connection to the world. Now let's give it a brain. We are entering the world of AI.
And this isn't just one topic, it's a universe. From the Siri in your phone to models that can write poetry.
We're going to unpack it all.
Broad micro theme. Simulating human intelligence in machines.
So let's start with the big definition. Artificial intelligence, or AI, is a broad field of computer science dedicated to creating machines that can perform tasks that typically require human intelligence.
Like learning, reasoning, problem solving.
And understanding language. Exactly.
So, when Netflix recommends a movie to me, it's not a person doing that. It's an AI that has learned my preferences.
Exactly. It's learned from the thousands of movies you've watched or rated, and it's making an intelligent guess. That's a perfect, simple example of AI.
The ultimate goal is to make machines that can think and act like humans.
Yes.
So what are the different types or levels of AI?
This is a really important distinction. The introduction is that AI is a transformative technology, but the term covers a wide spectrum.
And the background is that the idea is old, but progress has exploded recently.
Precisely, because of massive data and powerful computers.
So the core logic, the types of AI.
First, narrow AI, ANI, or weak AI. This is the only type of AI that exists today. It's designed and trained for one specific task.
Siri, Google Translate, self-driving cars. All narrow AI.
Yes. Yaad rakhna. Second, general AI, AGI or strong AI. This is the hypothetical human-level AI.
It would perform any intellectual task that a human can.
We are not there yet. And third, super intelligent AI, ASI.
A future concept where an AI would surpass human intelligence in every aspect.
Exactly. The real-world impact of narrow AI is already massive, optimizing everything from finance to medicine.
And the conclusion?
It's crucial to remember that AI is a spectrum. We are in the era of powerful but specialized narrow AI. AGI and ASI remain theoretical.
Okay, so just to be 100% clear, even something as advanced as ChatGPT is still considered narrow AI? It feels so smart.
Yes, that's correct. It is an extremely advanced form of narrow AI. It's brilliant at language.
But it can't cook a meal, drive a car, or feel emotions.
Exactly. And AGI would have that kind of generalized learning ability.
Is AGI, true GUI-level AI, even possible?
That is one of the most intense debates among scientists today.
So no consensus.
No. Some believe it's inevitable, perhaps within decades. Others are more skeptical.
You mentioned 3 core processes of AI at the start: learning, reasoning, and self-correction. Can you quickly break those down?
Sure. Learning is acquiring data and creating rules from it. Reasoning is using those rules to reach conclusions.
And self-correction is improving from feedback and new data.
Precisely.
So a computer that's the world champion at the game of Go is a perfect example of narrow AI.
A perfect example. It's superhuman at that one specific task. But ask it for the weather forecast and it would have no idea.
So its intelligence is very deep, but also incredibly narrow.
You got it.
And what about superintelligence, or ASI? Is that a dangerous idea?
It's a major topic of concern for many prominent thinkers. The primary concern is not about evil AI.
But about an AI whose goals might not be aligned with human values.
Exactly. It's known as the AI alignment problem, and it's a critical area of safety research. Practice saying this to remember the 3 types. Narrow AI is for specific tasks, general AI is human-like, and super-intelligent AI surpasses humans.
Mini recap. In short, all AI today is weak or narrow AI specialized for one job. Strong, human-level AI is still the ultimate far-off goal. Broad micro theme, the building blocks of AI systems. Okay, so we know what AI is and its different types. Now let's look under the hood. What are the key technologies that actually power AI?
Great question. AI isn't one single thing. It's an umbrella term. The most important ones to know are machine learning, deep learning, and natural language processing.
These are the pillars.
They are.
Can you give me a quick example to frame this?
Absolutely. When you upload a photo to social media, and it automatically suggests tagging your friends.
That's computer vision at work.
Exactly. A subfield of AI.
Got it. So let's break down these core building blocks.
Let's do it. Introduction. To truly understand AI, you need to understand its toolkit.
Background. These ideas are old, but we finally have the hardware and data to make them work.
Exactly. Core logic, the concepts. The most fundamental is machine learning, ML. Systems learn directly from data without being explicitly programmed.
And it has three main types.
Yes. Supervised learning, you train the model on labeled data, like pictures labeled cat and dog.
Unsupervised learning, you give it unlabeled data and it finds hidden patterns.
This is how AI learns to play games.
Okay, what's next?
Deep learning. This is a powerful subset of machine learning that uses artificial neural networks with many layers.
Most modern AI breakthroughs are in deep learning.
Yes. Then there's natural language processing, NLP.
This enables computers to understand and generate human language, chatbots, Siri.
Right.
And computer vision is how AI understands the visual world. Facial recognition, self-driving cars.
And finally, AI and edge computing.
Running AI models directly on a device instead of the cloud.
So, real-world impact is?
That these concepts are driving innovation everywhere.
They are. Conclusion, AI isn't magic. It's a powerful combination of these computational techniques.
What is the simplest way to understand the difference between machine learning and deep learning?
Think of them as Russian nesting dolls. AI is the biggest doll. Inside it is machine learning.
And inside machine learning is a smaller, more powerful doll called deep learning.
Exactly. So all deep learning is machine learning, but not all machine learning is deep learning.
The key difference is the multi-layered neural networks.
Yes, which allows it to handle much more complex data automatically.
Can you give me a simple analogy for reinforcement learning? That one feels a bit abstract.
The best analogy is training a pet. Imagine teaching a dog to sit. When it sits, you give it a treat, a reward.
When it doesn't, there's no reward.
Right. Over many attempts, the dog learns that the sit action leads to the maximum reward. Reinforcement learning is just a mathematical version of that.
You mentioned Edge AI. Why is that becoming so important?
Two main reasons: speed and privacy.
Speed. For a self-driving car, we discussed that. What about privacy?
Think about a smart home security camera. You might be more comfortable if the AI is running on the camera in your home.
Rather than streaming a live video feed of my living room to a company server 24/7.
Precisely.
Is natural language processing NLP just about understanding the dictionary definition of words?
Oh, it's so much more. Modern NLP is about understanding context, sentiment, ambiguity.
And even generating human-like text?
That's why chatbots and large language models have become so powerful. They understand the relationships between words.
There's one more you mentioned, briefly. Expert systems. Is that an older type of AI?
Exactly. It's one of the original forms of AI from the 70s and 80s. It's a non-learning AI.
So it's programmed with facts and if-then rules created by humans.
Yes, they are less flexible than ML systems, but are still very useful in fields where rules are well-defined.
Practice this. Machine learning learns from data, deep learning uses neural networks to find complex patterns, and NLP understands human language.
Mini recap. In short, these core concepts are the powerful tools that developers use to build all the AI systems we see around us. MLCNA, broad micro-theme, blending the real and virtual worlds.
All right, let's shift gears. We're now diving into the exciting world of AR, VR, and a bunch of other Rs.
These technologies are all about changing our perception of reality.
They're creating a spectrum, from a physical reality to a completely digital one.
That's the perfect way to put it. The four key terms to know are AR, VR, MR, and the umbrella term XR.
Okay, let's start with the two most famous ones. Give me a clear example for both AR and VR.
For augmented reality, AR, the classic example is Pokemon Go.
Right. You look at the real world through your phone, and a digital character is overlaid. It augments reality.
Exactly. For virtual reality, VR, imagine putting on a VR headset. Your vision and hearing are completely blocked from the real world.
And you are fully immersed in a different virtual world. It replaces your reality.
You got it.
So one adds to reality, the other replaces it. That's a clear distinction. Let's break these concepts down.
Let's get the definition straight. Introduction, AR, VR, and MR are not competing technologies. They are different points on a continuum.
Background. The dream of immersive virtual worlds is old. But it's only now that the technology is accessible.
Yes, thanks to powerful mobile processors and high-res screens. Now, core logic. Augmented reality, AR, overlays computer-generated information onto the real world. It enhances your current reality.
Virtual reality, VR, creates a completely immersive, computer-generated simulation. It replaces your real-world environment.
Mixed reality, MR. This is a more advanced form of AR. It not only overlays digital objects, but allows them to interact with the real world.
Like a virtual ball bouncing off a real table.
Exactly. And extended reality, XR, is the umbrella term that encompasses all of them.
The real-world impact is that these are moving beyond gaming.
Yes, VR for training surgeons, AR for technicians.
And the conclusion?
XR technologies are creating a new computing platform where information is not confined to a 2D screen, but integrated into our 3D world.
Okay, that was very clear. So if I'm using the AR mode in Google Maps, that's a perfect AR application.
A perfect example. It's overlaying digital navigation arrows on your view of the physical world.
And for mixed reality, what's a practical example that shows how it's different from basic AR?
Imagine an architect wearing a Microsoft HoloLens headset. They can see a detailed 3D digital model of a building in an empty room.
Okay.
The key MR feature is that they can walk around this digital model as if it were a physical object. It's anchored to and aware of reality.
So the digital object knows the real table is there. That's the mixed part. And VR is completely separate. Is one better than the other?
It's not about one being better, they are for different purposes. VR is for full immersion,
Like gaming or virtual travel?
and AR and MR are better for situations where you need to stay present in the real world but want digital information to help you.
Is the metaverse that we hear so much about related to VR?
Yes, very much so. The concept of the metaverse is a persistent, shared virtual space.
And VR is seen as the primary way to access it?
Exactly. You can think of VR as the doorway to the metaverse.
And XR is just the simple word to use when we're talking about all of these technologies at once.
Precisely. It's a convenient shorthand. Practice this to remember the difference. AR overlays digital information, VR replaces reality, and MR merges the two so they can interact.
Mini recap. In short, XR technologies are creating a new spectrum of experiences, from enhancing the real world to creating entirely new virtual ones. Wow, what an incredible journey so far. We've covered the cutting edge of computing, the vast universe of AI, and the mind-bending realities of XR.
We still have biotechnology, defense tech, and more to go, so stay with us.
Before we move on, let's do a quick recap of the first three major sections.
Okay, computing. We saw how CPS and IoT are making the physical world smart, how sensors give them senses, and how BCI is connecting our minds to machines.
Right, artificial intelligence. We clarified the difference between narrow AI and the hypothetical general AI. And we broke down core concepts like machine learning and deep learning.
And AR VR, we learned that AR enhances reality, VR replaces it, and MR blends them, all under the umbrella of XR.
Excellent. Now, here are some content probes for everyone listening to help you absorb this.
A little preview.
Challenge 1. Think about an Indian scientist we will discuss later. How might their work be relevant to the AI or computing technology we've covered?
Challenge 2. We will be talking about missiles. How might a cruise missile use technologies like IoT or sensors?
Challenge 3. What are the three main types of AI we discussed? Give one real-world example for narrow AI that you use every day.
Challenge 4. We will cover vaccines later. How is the development of new vaccines like a learning process similar to machine learning?
Challenge 5. CRISPR-Cas9 is a gene editing tool we'll explore. Think of it like a search and replace function. How might this be similar to how a computer program works?
Challenge 6. DNA and RNA are the building blocks of life. What's the relationship between data, processing, and output in a computer, and DNA, RNA, and proteins in a cell?
And here's a simple challenge for you. Pick any one technology we discussed today, be it AI, BCI, or AR, and write down 3 ways it could positively change the world in the next 10 years, and 1 potential risk we need to manage. Thoda soch lo. And that's a wrap on this part of our massive deep dive. Hope this was super helpful. Remember, knowledge is a journey, not a destination.
Keep that curiosity alive. We'll be back with more.
Subscribe now, comment with your thoughts on today's topics, and share this with anyone who loves to learn. We'll see you on the next one. Until then, keep exploring.